Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're putting on our analytical hats and diving straight into a highly controversial piece of online rhetoric about modern gender dynamics. We're looking at a specific, widely shared argument from the Arabic-speaking sphere that taps directly into what's often called red pill ideology. Look, we're not here to take sides at all. We're just here to objectively unpack the architecture of this argument. How exactly does the speaker view relationships? What are the supposed tactics being used against men? And what on earth are his proposed defenses? Let's just get right into it. Here is how we're going to break this down today. First, the alleged psychological war. Second, the trap of trust and sharing. Third, the love bomb and sex card. Fourth, the monk mode defense. And finally, regaining control in the relationship. Section 1, the alleged psychological war. The source kicks things off with a pretty bold, uncompromising premise. Basically, that unaware men are the victims of a psychological war being waged by manipulative women. To really grasp this, we've got to look at the speaker's core terminology. He refers to intimacy as the major pressure card. In this framework, intimacy is completely stripped of all its romantic vibes and is framed entirely as a strategic transaction. The speaker claims women recognize a man's physical drives and intentionally use them as leverage, literally as a bargaining chip to extract favors or assert dominance. And to back this up, the speaker tries to build an intellectual framework around it. He cites authors like Esther Villar to explain what he calls feminine charm. The argument goes that, historically, women develop these advanced psychological mechanisms to appear innocent, angelic. By acting vulnerable, they essentially trigger a man's protective instinct, which disarms him and makes him much more susceptible to manipulation. Moving on to Section 2, the trap of trust and sharing. So how does the speaker claim this manipulation actually starts in the real world? Well, it doesn't start with demands. It starts with connection. According to the argument, stripping a man's defenses starts by building trust. The speaker views a man's willingness to share his inner worries, vulnerabilities, or even just his future projects as a massive, critical error. The idea is, the more mysterious a man remains, the better his position in the relationship. By opening up, he's unwittingly handing his partner the exact blueprint to his mind, letting her mold herself into his right hand while secretly pulling the strings. That takes us right to Section 3, the love bomb and sex card. This is where we get into the core mechanics of chemical addiction and relational leverage. The source literally maps out a specific 3-step timeline for this psychological manipulation. Step 1, establish trust. Step 2 is what he calls the love bomb. The speaker explicitly mentions hormones here, dopamine and oxytocin, claiming women intentionally create a chemical addiction so the man ties his entire happiness to her. And then, Step 3, once he's totally dependent, she intentionally delays or withholds physical intimacy, transforming it from connection into a conditional reward. To maintain that leverage, the source argues women exploit male visual or animal instincts. This is actually framed as the real underlying reason for heavy spending on cosmetics, clothes, and surgeries. The source even explicitly warns men about pillow talk. It asserts that manipulative partners use those vulnerable moments right after intimacy, exactly when those dopamine and oxytocin levels are totally peaking, to ask for things, knowing full well the man is biologically primed to just say yes. So that naturally begs a really critical question, one the speaker uses to pivot toward his actual solutions. If intimacy is this weaponized pressure card, how is a man supposed to defend himself? Which brings us to Section 4, the monk mode defense. To answer that question, the explainer introduces a pretty radical strategy, one centered entirely around self-mastery and deprivation. This source creates this incredibly stark dichotomy here. He contrasts the easily manipulated ordinary man with the highly disciplined, high-value man. The speaker argues that these manipulative tactics, they only work on average men who are basically slaves to their own desires. A high-value man operates totally differently. Because he has options and immense self-control, the claim is that women won't even dare try to play the sex card against him. So, how do you become that guy? The speaker heavily advocates for what the internet often calls monk mode or nofap. He asserts that a man who can entirely control his physical urges is a man who simply cannot be blackmailed. He really hammers this point home. A man who controls his animal instincts is terrifying to manipulative women because he has systematically disarmed the literal only weapon they have against him. Section 5. Regaining control in the relationship. Let's look at the actionable advice prescribed for men who might currently feel trapped in these exact transactional dynamics. How do they flip the script? The source lays out specific counter tactics to shift the power dynamic back to the man by making him way less accessible. First, stop arguing completely. Just state your point and walk away, because arguing supposedly lowers a man's status. Next, hit the gym. He notes that a lot of men let themselves go after marriage, which tanks their value. And finally, stop making your partner the center of your universe. Go out with friends, build an external life, and completely withdraw any excessive attention.
Now, think about how far you'd actually go to maintain leverage in a relationship. According to the speaker, a man has to continually increase his sexual market value to create what he calls healthy drama. Basically, he wants the partner's mind to race, wondering if other women are checking him out. To justify this, the speaker even points to the historical Islamic allowance for 4 wives, interpreting it, impartially within his framework, as a built-in societal mechanism to maintain female competition and keep a man's desirability high.
Taking it even a step further, the speaker instructs men to actively reject their partners every few months. Yes, you heard that right. Even if she initiates, he says you need to say no occasionally. The stated goal here is to completely disrupt the power balance, damage her ego, and essentially train her to realize that intimacy absolutely cannot be used as a tool to control him. Ultimately, the source claims that if the transactional nature of the relationship just keeps persisting, despite all these tactics, like if she's still treating intimacy like a negotiation with a street vendor, a man has to simply walk away. He argues that some relationships are fundamentally toxic and broken beyond repair, and you have to be willing to leave just to maintain your own self-respect. So, having mapped out the entire anatomy of this argument, we really have to step back and ask ourselves what this framework ultimately means for the future of human connection. The source material presents a worldview where trust is seen as a liability, vulnerability is a glaring weakness, and intimacy is treated as a weaponized commodity. It's a fascinating, albeit super intense look at modern internet gender rhetoric. But it does leave us with a lingering thought. If we put on a full suit of armor just to survive a relationship, are we actually protecting ourselves from manipulation, or are we simply ensuring that true intimacy can never, ever reach us? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.